This isn't the day to say that. This is not the day to say that. So Acts chapter 16, let's start all over again. With Paul and Silas in Philippi, they have been evangelizing to people from all different kinds of backgrounds. They've met Lydia down at the river where she was down at the river to pray, literally. And they shared the gospel of Jesus with her. She was already a believer in God. She knew Jehovah. She had a relationship with God, but she needed to know Jesus. Then they worked for days and days and days after that, spreading the gospel. They're going back and forth between that place at the river, teaching more and more people. They're teaching people around town. And during that time, sometime, a girl starts following them around. And we talked about her last week. She had some sort of a spirit that was a prophesying spirit, not from God, but from Satan, that tormented her, but made her owners, and that's what they were, her owners, a lot of money. She was a trafficked young lady, probably in more ways than one, in the first century, or our own, unfortunately. This still happens, where people are bought and sold like cattle, right here under our noses. I mentioned last week, I don't know if you caught the number, but they say the number is around 97,000 young people are trafficked in the state of Texas right now. That's like San Angelo in slavery, the entire city. Think about that for a second. Now think about this. 4 years ago, that number was in the 70s. 70-something thousand, they thought, were in slavery in the state of Texas. I don't know what this Bible Belt people keep talking about is, but you don't have 97,000 people sold into trafficked slavery and call yourself a Christian place. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Our influence has got to become brighter, stronger, and deeper. It just has to. And we have got to stand up for people who are in those kinds of circumstances, because we are far from done with that war on slavery and everything else. It is bad out there. It's just that we're so comfortable and they're so good at hiding it that we can pretend that it's not happening, but it's happening. Paul is in a world like that where it's actually much more in your face. Sometimes the only difference between the sins of the first century and the sins of the current is that theirs were out in the open and we're still lying about ours. Okay? That's the only difference sometimes. And theirs were out just in your face. And so this little girl is following him around and she's shouting what we talked about last week, what sounds like, that would be like a good thing, right? For her to give free advertising that they're missionaries and they're trying to spread salvation and these men are from God. It's a good thing, right? Well, yes and no. Not just, we say, any publicity, good news or bad news, it's all still free publicity. That doesn't make it all good. And Paul got annoyed with this to the point that he turns around and he heals her, but not in that nice, touchy-feely sort of a way. He heals her out of frustration. Let's go ahead and reread this, get in our heads, starting in verse 16. Once when we were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a female slave who had a spirit by which she predicted the future. She earned a great deal of money for her owners by fortune-telling. She followed Paul and the rest of us, shouting, "These men are servants of the Most High God, who are telling you the way to be saved." She kept this up for many days. And finally, Paul became so annoyed that he turned around and said to the spirit, "In the name of Jesus, I command you to come out of her." At that moment, the spirit left her. For her, this is a wonderful thing. Potentially. She is healed of this spirit. Notice that he does not rebuke the girl. He rebukes the spirit. And it's important. Just file that away as a little side parenthetical lesson. You rebuke the evil spirits. You rescue the girl. Do we need to remember that as we go out into our world and we see things going wrong and we see people given over to things that are dark and that are evil? We do. Because our battle is not against flesh and blood. It's not against that little girl. It's against the spiritual forces of evil. Our battle still is against the evil that entraps the people around us. Our enemy is not the people around us. That's going to be important as we look at what else happened with Paul and Silas and what's going on in our world. When her owners realized that their hope of making money was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace to face the authorities. They brought them before the magistrates and said, "These men are Jews, and they're throwing our city into an uproar." Notice how they accuse them of being Jews, as if that's as bad as throwing the city into an uproar. A little bit of racism going on there. "These men are Jews, and they're throwing our city into an uproar by advocating customs unlawful for us Romans to accept or practice." Was that true? No. The crowd joined in the attack against Paul and Silas, and the magistrates ordered them to be stripped and beaten with rods. Did they get a fair trial? No, they did not. They did not. Did they even apparently get much of a hearing? No, they did not. Were there witnesses to what they had done wrong? No, because they hadn't done anything illegal or wrong. But they were still prosecuted, persecuted, whipped, and beaten. After they had been severely flogged, which we'll learn at another time when Paul pulls his Roman citizen card. He doesn't do it this time. This time he just takes it. We'll learn at another time what they did there was actually illegal in Paul's case. They were thrown into prison, and the jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. And when he received these orders, he put them in the inner cell and fastened their feet with stocks. I want to stop right there, and let's talk about some things. We live in a time where we are still among the most blessed people ever to have walked on the face of the planet. I think we have to start there, because our perspective sometimes gets skewed, doesn't it? Sometimes we feel as if that's not true, but that's true. And that's not even just true of those of us who live in the United States. You may be watching this from a bunch of other countries where that's also true, where no one has lived in your home country as well as they live today. And yet at times, as Christians, we sometimes look at things and we start to sing the songs of those who are persecuted. And I wonder, what would be our song if this happened to us? What would we be put into prison and start singing? Would we start singing immediately what Bugs Bunny always sang? Because I watched a lot of Bugs Bunny as a kid. We're going to go there every now and then. You just have to. And what did he sing? Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows my sorrow. Right? And you just feel sorry for yourselves. Or you sing what they sing on Hee Haw. Boy, they sing on Hee Haw. Gloom, despair, and agony on me. Oh! Right? Or do you sing what they sing? Here. Tempted and tried, where all may wander, why it should be thus all the day long, as if we're in some horrible, sorrowful circumstance. I always want to do the same thing on that song too. I always want to go, "Whoa!" like on Hee Haw when we're singing that song. I do control myself. It's hard. It's very hard. We love to think in terms of the worst possible outcome, don't we? We do. We do. Yesterday, I'm checking something on Emma's car. I have a Band-Aid. I'm not looking for sympathy. I have a Band-Aid. And you will notice that it's very tiny because I swapped out the big one I had on it because I didn't like it. Because I do like them not to be so obvious, you know. But I was taking something apart or putting it back together. I forget which stage of things I was at. And this big metal clamp, when I went to slide it off of an intake, the metal clamp just sliced a chunk of hide just right off of my finger. I didn't actually notice at the time. I thought, well, that kind of hurt, but I just kept doing what I was doing. And later I thought, that's a little rip for motor oil, and I'm not even anywhere near there. Blood. So I went and I fixed that. But you would have thought it was much worse, because all I had on me was this great big paper towel. And if you'd have come back out there at that moment, you would have thought that I must just think I just ripped my finger off. Because I had this gigantic paper towel, and then while I'm putting the towel on, I'm thinking, you know, that's really not very clean. I checked the oil with it and everything else already, you know. But I don't know, that could be disinfecting. And so I got this big old nasty thing, and in my mind I thought, I guess there could be something on that paper towel. When I say I checked the oil, that was in July, and this rag's been on a toolbox in the garage. Ever since then, who knows what's crawled over that paper towel in that time. That's what starts going through my mind. And I start thinking, well, that's kind of nasty. I guess my finger could fall off next week. I wonder what I should do about that. I ignored it until I got done with what I was doing. Then eventually I went inside and cleaned it. But in your mind, you can't help every now and then. But you just, even if you're not actually serious about it, it just runs to, oh, this could be bad. This could be really bad. And I think if we were put into a prison, in the most secure cell, the inner cell, the one where you have to get past several gates and several locks, it might be easy to go dark in our mood. But the truth is, we go dark very quickly, all the time, under much easier circumstances. If you listen to the chatter of a lot of Christians today and their conversations, whether in person or online, I don't know why we always have to specify that nowadays, but we talk in so many different arenas now. The conversations trend to the worst possible on so many things. Whether that be COVID or the reaction to COVID, whether that be, algorithms and everything else, we immediately go to Amazon came out the other day with a little robot that follows you around. You can have it, play your music and follow you from room to room, or you can have a video chat with people from room to room. And immediately, it was RoboCop. That's what that's going to be. That's going to be. Well, it didn't have a machine gun built into it. You would have thought so by the way some people reacted. But yes, there are concerns. There are privacy concerns, and there are all those things. And I don't want that thing roaming around my house. But we immediately go to the farthest possible thing. Now, there's a good reason for that. We need to think through, short step, long journey. If I take this short step, where does that eventually lead? But we are also a slippery slope people, are we not? And everybody says, oh, no, you can't make that argument. That's a slippery slope argument. But then the next thing out of their mouth is an alternative slippery slope. Have you ever noticed that? I've noticed that. This is what happens. We just like to go the worst possible. So, we live in a world where Christianity in our own society, in the United States, is more out of favor than it used to be. We had fooled ourselves, and it is fooling ourselves. We had fooled ourselves into thinking it was always in favor in the past. And some of you with rose-colored nostalgic glasses will say, oh, but James, when I was alive in the such and such, don't do that to me. I'm going to warn you. Don't do that to me. I've read history books and I know what it was like back then. Some of it I lived through as a child and saw what it was like back then. I know people who suffered back then. The past was not as holy as we think it was. We were always on the outs with Satan. There has never been a time he was fine with what we're doing, and neither has the rest of the world been okay with it. Sometimes Satan lets us have it soft for a while because he knows that that makes us as lazy, and sometimes even more lazy, than persecution does. That's actually true. We are in the situation we're in with it being more out of favor, not because the world has gotten harsher. The world is what the world has always been. Not because the world has gotten harsher. In some ways, the world has actually woken up to some things and made right on some things and repented of some things, and we don't acknowledge that. The world hasn't gotten harsher. Persecution hasn't gotten more likely. We have gotten softer. Our light has gotten dimmer. It has not gone out, but it has gotten dimmer. But the world didn't do that. We did that. We did that because we're the only ones who control how bright a light we live or not. We're the only ones who control whether we set an example of faith or not. We worry and we go to the worst possible scenario. It's going to be bad. It's going to be the worst. It's going to be persecution. Possible. You know what Jesus said? Persecution's coming. Did that already go somewhere? No. Okay, here we are. I'll get it. I can't see from down here. It makes it hard. Persecution is going to happen. In the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, Jesus tells us this in verses 11 and 12. He says, "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." So Jesus says two things. It's gonna happen. It's going to happen, period. So yeah, should you expect it? Yes. But you should have never expected for it not to be. We should have never thought that we could just be completely off guard. It was always going to happen. But he also doesn't give us the answer we wanted, does he? Persecution is going to happen. And I want you to stand up, and I want you to fight it, and I want you to bring it down. That's not what he said. That's what Facebook says. That's what they say down at the gym in West Texas. It is not what Jesus said. What did Jesus say? It's going to happen. And you'll be blessed. When you put that bumper sticker on your car, blessed. You can't say blessed. Blessed. You weren't thinking of that, were you? Did you put the sticker on your car? Did you post "too blessed to be stressed" to Facebook? Were you thinking about persecution? Were you thinking about jail time? No, we were thinking about lazy boys, vacations, and arts and crafts, weren't we? Going hunting, sitting in a blind. It's October. I know where some of your minds are. That's what we were thinking about. Jesus says you're blessed when you're so much like me, people start reacting to you like they reacted to me. And like they reacted to the prophets who came before. Don't expect to win a popularity contest being like Jesus. This is what he says. You would think it would. I mean, it's logical to think that would actually make you have more friends. But it doesn't. It doesn't. It just doesn't. It was never meant to. Because Satan is still in this world. And evil is still going to happen. And people are still going to react in the wrong ways. Now you'll notice I have up there that sometimes it's going to come out of left field. It did for Jesus all the time. All the time. It just came out of left field. It often did not come from the world. Sometimes it came, in this case for Paul and Silas, it does come from the world. But sometimes it came from brothers and sisters. Sometimes it came from Pharisees. Those were brothers. Sadducees, teachers of the law. Those were people he went to synagogue and church with. Worshiped at the temple with. We come from some strange places. And it still will. It still will. At the same time that I'm saying that, we also don't need to think. We need to be prepared that it will happen. We don't need to think that it's just the end of the world. Because what does he say? No, I'm going to bless you through that. Even in those times, what does he say during the Great Commission? Matthew 28. What does he say? And lo, I am with you even to the end of the age. Always. Always. So no matter what happens, in the good times and in the bad, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, Jesus is with you. And he will bless you with the strength to handle it, with opportunities in the midst of it. He will bless you. So, as we look at our world and you look at some of the things that are going on right now, it might be easy to feel like, as Christians, there is a target on your back. And with some people, that's probably true. There are still people out there like these people, these traffickers. They're not all traffickers, though. But these, in Acts 16, are, who make their living off of manipulating people, who make their living off of taking advantage of people. And they don't want people coming in and showing an honest way of life and a way of integrity. And honestly, they don't care if you're a Christian or something else in this case. They'll persecute you either way when you start talking honesty and integrity. it's going to be a problem, isn't it? How do we react in those moments? We know hardship is going to come. We know persecution is going to come. I don't think we should walk around with a persecution complex. I don't think we should assume that we're not doing the Lord's will if we're not persecuted, or that we are if we are being persecuted. Sometimes we're persecuted because we deserve it, because we're being dorky. You know, that happens too. So we don't want to walk around with any of these complexes. What should we do then? What were they doing? They were spreading the gospel. They were loving their neighbor. They were serving the Lord. They were worshiping God. Sometimes they got flack for that, and when they did, they handled it with grace. And when they didn't, they praised God. And the really cool thing, the praising God part lasted through both circumstances. That's usually what we look at when we come to this, is that they praised God in the middle of a prison. But here's how I want to look at that today. We know that times of hardship, whether they're personal or larger, societal or church-wide, we know that times of hardship are always meant, or are used by God, I should say. They're not always meant for this, but this is how God uses them. They're used to refine us. If Satan attacks, God can turn that into a refining moment that actually stiffens our back in a good way, not just a stubborn way, but in a good, strong faith way, that stiffens our resolve and focuses us on what really, really matters. Difficult times will come, and when they do, they will either focus us on what matters or drive us away from what matters. And the difference will not be the circumstance, because faith can never be just circumstantial. Faith has to be there already, because that's what persecution and hardship does. It refines our faith. Peter says it in the way that's on the screen. These have come, trials, hardships, and persecution. He talks about all those things in 1 Peter. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Christ is revealed. Peter is telling us, you're going to go through these things. He says, and that by the time of that letter, you're already starting to go through some of these things. Don't be afraid. Don't back down. Don't give up. You hang on, because this only makes you worth even more to God, to the world around you, to the people who need you to love them like Jesus, even in the darkest of circumstances. You know, the truth is, we could live our lives and it could go on just like it's gone the last 50 years, where it's a mixed bag of some things get better, some things get worse, but generally, you know, we have a pretty good life. And you work and you retire and all of that good stuff, and you end up with, you know, just a good life. That could happen. It could just be what we would call just normal. And some preacher, 30 years, could be standing up here saying the exact same thing, saying, you know, so they're talking like it could get real bad real soon. And y'all be saying, yeah, James said that 30 years ago, and look what happened. Nothing. You know, it could happen. It could happen, because 30 years ago, I think I heard this sermon from Paul Sherrill. You know, you just never know. It could happen. Between now and then, though, what else could happen? Could you love someone enough to share the gospel between now and then? Could you love someone enough that you don't even know to fill their refrigerator a few times? Could you clothe people whose house burned down? Could you let some really annoying behaviors by a coworker just roll off your back and love them instead anyway? Could that bear fruit? Could you witness baptisms of people you would never dream would have come to the Lord? See, that could happen too, couldn't it? And everything I just listed happens independently of our circumstances. Even though those are all circumstantial, they can happen independently of our circumstances. We worry about the wrong things. Because in the end, we will not stand before the Lord on the day of judgment or the day of reward, depending on how that goes, right? We will not stand before the Lord and hear Him say, was it easy enough for you? Did I make it comfortable enough for you? Do you need another pillow? He told us in Matthew 25 what He's going to say. We actually already know. We don't have to guess. We don't have to wonder. We don't have to say, Lord, what's it going to be like? He said He's going to separate out to His right and His left, the sheep and the goats. Right? And what's He going to talk to them about? Did you love? Did you feed? Did you clothe? Did you visit me? To those where the answer is yes, He is going to say, come on in. What did they do with their years, regardless of the circumstances? That's going to be the question. So Paul and Silas end up in a prison. It's not fair. It's not right. That's what we'd be talking about, isn't it? We'd have snuck in an iPhone and start tweeting. You know, I don't think they even changed the pillows in here yesterday. Oh, I bet they didn't. I stayed at a hotel in New York one time. You had a menu of 5 different. It was a menu of pillow. There is no menu of pillow in a Roman prison. They're going to tweet that? They didn't even offer me a Japanese buckwheat pillow. How dare they? Really? My latte had ice in it. That's what they did in Roman prisons. Did you know that? They didn't give you food. They didn't give you medical care. They didn't give you a pillow. They force-feed you iced coffee. Because they know that's all the hell you ever need to experience. You'll never break a law again. Anyway, they don't do any of that. But we would be whining, complaining, tweeting. If we can't tweet it, we'll write it on the wall, won't we? And then we'll fake a little thumb right there that says we got 493 likes on our fake little tweet on the wall. I don't deserve to be here. These people are going to get it when the Lord returns. Really? Is that what it's about? Whiny, whiny, whiny. Gloom, despair. There we go. What song would you sing? We have no idea what song they sang. We know what it was called. Praises. They prayed and they praised. So we know what songs it wasn't. Isn't that something? We would say, oh, it'd be perfectly biblical. It'd be normal to sing a lament song. And that's really what the ones I'm making fun of, that's kind of what they are. They're lament songs. They have a place in life. There are some psalms, obviously dated. For all we know, that hee-haw song has a tune straight out of David's tunes. I don't know. There's a couple of those psalms, I'm pretty sure he was hee-hawing it. But that isn't what they sang. They praised God. God ends up sending, as you know, an earthquake, shakes the whole place. And while He does that, chains fall off, and locks fall off, and gates fly open. And when the lights come on, the guard is scared to death that they're all gone. So they call the lights to come on, and there's still prisoners there. But the soldier already has his sword drawn. I will tell you something. I am afraid in our current climate that there are people who call themselves, they can't possibly be, but there are people who call themselves Christians. That the way they talk about politicians, the way they talk about politics, the way they talk about people with whom they disagree, I think they would have offered to sharpen the sword for that guard. There are some evil attitudes, sometimes spoken by people we call brother and sister. That was not Paul and Silas. Because our battle is not against flesh and blood. Even the guard, who may have been there while you were flogged, who may have held it, who makes sure you don't escape, They cared about it. What did they offer? Persecution doesn't win unless we let it. Persecution fails in light of the power of a Christ-like spirit. Persecution cannot win when we are like Jesus. So, whether it turns out to be nothing in our lifetime, or whether it turns out to be unpredictably bad, that persecution will fail. The persecution that goes on right now around the world is failing. Church is growing like gangbusters in countries where the persecution is the most violent and the harshest, and where Christians sink in prison. Because persecution fails when we have a Christ-like spirit. And Paul and Silas showed us the way forward. They sang and they prayed. But I'll tell you, the most powerful part of their example for me is not even that. It used to be. That used to be the part I would look at and say, wow, that's amazing. It is, but no. I think the most amazing thing is the scene that follows. They speak to the soldier. They let him know, hey, we're all here. Do not harm yourself. 1 Corinthians 13, Paul talks about love. He just says, if you can prophesy, if you can speak in tongues, if you can do all these amazing, miraculous, of the Holy Spirit things, but you don't have love, you are nothing but a clanging gong. You're nothing but a banging cymbal. And you know what those are worth? We're an a cappella church. They ain't worth nothing. They're worth nothing. We're just a bunch of noise. Their singing would have been noise. And catch this. This is important. Their singing would have been nothing but annoying noise if they had then shown spite to the soldier. If they had ignored him and let him do himself in and said, well, he hurt us. One good turn deserves another. That's the attitude of our world. It's the attitude of too many in our country right now. It cannot be the attitude of a disciple of Jesus. Not for a second. Instead, they go to him. They stop him from harming himself. They show him kindness. They show him respect. Yes, it is a kingdom value to show respect to those with whom you not only disagree, but even if in their disagreement, they do seek to harm you. It's not easy, but it's Jesus. They love him. They share the gospel with him. He takes them home, which shows us the depth of their genuine kindness. In gratitude, he takes them home. He nurses their wounds. Is there a more beautiful picture in this moment than that? We focus on the singing and the praying. Let's focus on the ministry for a second. They go to his home, and a Roman guard nurses their wounds. The love on his part is miraculous as well, because they were also his enemy. They heal each other. Paul and Silas share the gospel. The jailer says, I got to be a part of what you've got. Do we even understand that that is like the moving of a mountain by faith? That a Roman guard would show kindness to a prisoner is nearly miraculous itself. That he then says, and I want to join you in what you just got into